Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good morning, depends on where you are. Today is 20th September, a beautiful day, a beautiful Sunday. We are at a special session of the third International Forum of Computational Law. Together with us are Professor Briggers from Oxford University, Professor Xu Lan, Dean of Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University, Dame Professor Wendy Hall, our important guest from University of Southampton, Professor Yu Yang, a promising assistant professor from the Institute of Interdisciplinary Information Science at Tsinghua University, Professor Liu Han, associate professor of constitutional law from our law school of Tsinghua University. In this special session, we will bring to the Chinese audience a special report presented by Oxford team composed by Professor Andrew Briggers. This report is Citizenship in the Networked Age. It's just very brand new report. Congratulations to Professor Briggers. This report is going to be published this year. Actually, it has a special meaning in this year because of COVID-19. More and more human activities will be carried out on network. Now, I would like to introduce Professor Briggers, who are the author of this report. Andrew Briggers is a professor of nanomaterials at the University of Oxford. His research interest focused on materials and technologies for quantum technology and their incorporation into practical devices. He was inspired to look at the implications of human flourishing of development in digital technology and artificial intelligence by machine learning. He used for experiments in his laboratory. He has more than 600 publications, over 25,000 citations. His most recent book is Penultimate Curiosity.
Penultimate Curiosity.
The slipstream of ultimate questions, which is also published in Shanghai this year. The book's Chinese name is 次终极追问. So Professor Briggers, will you please give us a brief introduction about your new report and share your idea with our Chinese audience? Please, welcome Professor Briggers.
Well, thank you very much, Dean Chen, and thank you all for coming to this launch of our new report. Let me share my screen. So 3 years ago, a group of us were in a room here in Oxford brainstorming about human flourishing. And we reflected on how promoting human flourishing needs the best of scientific insight and also spiritual wisdom. Now, we were aware that people have been thinking about human flourishing since probably before writing was invented. And in a sense, everybody we know cares about human flourishing in some way. So we asked, what is changing in the world that affects human flourishing? What aspect of human flourishing does that change affect? And why do we care about that aspect of human flourishing? And in the light of that, what new approaches will be needed, or how do established approaches need to be applied in fresh ways? So we asked, what's changing in the world that affects flourishing. We ran a series of consultation meetings with people who share our concern for these questions in Oxford and around the world in disparate cultures on 3 continents. And we identified many global changes that are happening: healthcare, life expectancy, gender attitudes, poverty amelioration, economic models, education and the role of the university, changing patterns of religious commitment. And then we also identified some technological changes. And of the technological changes, the one that floated to the top was digital networking. And as Dean Shen has just said, in ways that we scarcely foresaw at the time that we wrote the report, that has gained a new poignancy through the connectivity that digital networking has provided in the lockdown. And digital networking has become inseparable from artificial intelligence. I like to make it a distinction between broad artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence, in which the machines set their own goals. And that's the subject of movies and science fiction and philosophical analysis, but it's still a long way off. And then narrow artificial intelligence, which is with us now in the form of machine learning. And where previously computers were programmed to perform a task, now they're programmed to learn to perform a task. And artificial intelligence is itself undergoing a transition from classification to decision-making. We use machine learning in my laboratory in Oxford. As Dean Shen was telling you, we undertake research on solid-state devices for quantum technologies such as quantum computing. And in our experiments, we cool a device to a 50th of a degree above absolute zero, which is colder than anywhere in the universe outside a laboratory that we know of. And we put 1 electron into each region of the device. Each region is about 1,000th of the diameter of a hair on your head. And we have to tune up the very delicate quantum states. And even for an experienced researcher, that can take several hours, and a new graduate student might take several days or even weeks. And our machine has now learned how to tune up these devices and can do it in 12 minutes. So already in my laboratory, we're benefiting from the advances that machine learning can bring us. And we're all using this all the time. Every time you use the internet to browse or to buy or for social media like WeChat or TikTok, you're engaging with machine learning, because these digital industries use your data exhaust to learn as much as they can about you. And we need a new kind of citizenship to flourish in this digitally networked era of machine learning. One of my colleagues in the philosophy department at Oxford put it like this. He said, there is a long distance race between humanity's technological capability, which is like a stallion galloping across the fields, and humanity's wisdom, which is more like a foal on unsteady legs. And as we undertook the consultation, we identified several aspects of human flourishing that digital networking and artificial intelligence impact. And you'll see that these different aspects all relate to citizenship, because digital networking, it affects our identity and how we interact. And the English word citizen comes from a city, which originally was the locus of identity and of interaction. It affects our life as an individual and as a community. And of course, a citizen is an individual, but you can't be a citizen by yourself without other people. And in particular, machine learning impacts on our privileges and responsibilities for decision-making, just as citizens have privileges and responsibilities to engage in decision-making and in committing to the outcome. And so our report addresses the question, in a networked age, what is needed to promote good citizenship aimed at human flourishing? As we undertook the consultations, it was all too easy for opinions to become polarized. On the one hand, you have the amazing opportunities brought about by digital networking and machine learning. Hello, was that a question? No.
No, I don't think so. You can go forward.
Yeah. You have the opportunities of administrative efficiency, demand forecasting, healthcare, where there are amazing advances being made, technical innovation. But then also there are some threats from the machine learning. There's commercial surveillance, risk of political interference, employment displacement as jobs are taken over by the machines, and even moral surrogacy, where there's a risk of leaving the moral choices to the machines. And as we undertook the consultations, we found that it was very easy for opinions to be polarized. On the one side, you have nerds like me and entrepreneurs in early stage companies and in healthcare who are full of enthusiasm of the amazing things that machine learning can enable. And on the other side, often, but not always, people in social sciences and philosophy and policy who are full of concern for the hazards of AI. And this polarization is unnecessary and it's undesirable because both points of view have a validity and a full range of backgrounds is needed to address the moral issues and to identify the good qualities of citizenship that are needed. And I very much hope that you'll read the report, because we worked very hard to draw on a range of disciplines to address all sides of the issues. And you can go to the website, it's Citizenship in a Networked Age, all as one word. Now, the report makes 7 practical recommendations, ranging from identifying and protecting human uniqueness for moral decision-making to revaluing democracy in terms of the ability to bring about social unity and trust. So, for example, recommendation number 2 is about nurturing the complementary skills of humans and machines for collective decision-making. So I've already mentioned that there's amazing advances being made in healthcare. There's a significant number of studies that show how machine learning is more accurate and more reliable at analyzing ultrasound scans and radiographs than even an experienced radiographer. So now you ask the question, which would you rather be diagnosed by? An established human radiologist or a machine with demonstrated superior performance? Or to put it another way, would you want to be diagnosed by a machine that knew less than your doctor? Answer, no. Well then, would you want to be diagnosed by a doctor who knew less than the machine? And that's a bit more difficult. Perhaps the question needs to be changed. Would you prefer to be treated by a doctor without machine learning or a doctor making wise use of machine learning? Now, if we want humans to be involved in decisions involving our health, how much more in decisions involving our freedom? But are humans completely reliable and consistent? There was one study that suggested that the probability of a favorable decision from a judge depended on whether the judge had had his lunch. The very fact that legal appeals are sometimes successful provides empirical evidence that law, like any other human endeavor, involves uncertainty and fallibility. In the UK, 20 or so years ago, when it began to become apparent that there was inconsistency in sentencing for similar offences across the country, the Sentencing Council for England and Wales was established in 2009 to promote greater transparency and consistency in sentencing. And the code sets out factors which judges must consider in passing sentence and ranges of tariffs for different kinds of crimes. If you like, that's another step in algorithmic sentencing. Now, if you were up in court, would you want a machine that is less consistent than a judge to pass sentence? Of course not. But now, would you want a judge that's less consistent than a machine to pass sentence? And again, that's a more difficult question. And so perhaps you change the question to, would you want a judge who does not have the benefit of machine learning, or one that does? And Dean Chen is making amazing progress in this for judges in China. And then there's an additional component, which is the commitment to the decision that's made. A good way to achieve that is for everyone to share in the process of decision making. Many of us in the West admire the Chinese for the way that you can try out new ideas and evaluate the results through a decentralization of decision-making and sharing of information. And I think the new skill that's needed is to be able to do that in decision-making which benefits from the resources of machine learning. The recommendation that seems to gain most traction among students is teaching listening as a civic virtue, recommendation number 4, because of the increased ability of everyone to state their views and publicize them to everybody else, or indeed to target them on selected individuals. And that means that there's no longer a scarcity of good speakers, but instead a scarcity of good listeners. My own favorite recommendation is number 6, to promote the value of privacy for personal and moral development, because that's where we get time to think deeply about what human flourishing consists of and how to apply that in the context in which each of us finds ourselves. Another thing that we in the West greatly admire in the Chinese culture is your strong sense of common purpose. And that needs to be regenerated quite literally in each new generation. And the networked age brings new challenges because the person who's forever online doesn't give themselves enough space to do it. It needs privacy for reflection. So here's a test for everyone in the audience today who's over 50. It's a dangerous and potentially painful experiment for you to do, so it's best done in private. So here's the experiment. First of all, think of the 3 things in your whole life into which you've put most thought. They may be to do with a career step, or a financial negotiation, or a legal matter, or something else. But they're the 3 things that you've put most thought into in your lifetime to date. Now, think of the 3 things that you most regret in your lifetime to date. And for most people, there's a mismatch. And the things that they regret are mostly not about any of the things that they put most thought into. They're mostly about moral decisions, often about relationships, sometimes with family members or with a life partner. And if we're to regenerate ourselves morally, we need to promote the value of privacy. I care so much about these things and about human flourishing that my next book is about human flourishing. Oxford University Press will publish it next year. And it sets out 3 dimensions of human flourishing: the material, the relational, and the transcendent. in the material world, which I study in my laboratory at Oxford, the material world seems to call us to something beyond ourselves. What William Wordsworth described, an English poet, as a presence that disturbs me, with the sense of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns. And these dimensions of flourishing don't float suspended with no visible means of support. And in the book, we identify 3 pillars of flourishing, which are truth and meaning and purpose. So I hope that the lockdown is providing for each of us what my Japanese friends call a stop and think point. And I hope that we'll make good use of it. I hope that having made unprecedented use of digital technologies, we shall think afresh about what qualities of citizenship are needed to make the best use of machine decision-making. I hope that we'll develop a full respect for the dignity and value of every human, regardless of what they look like. There's a growing evidence that humans are made for cooperation, and networking gives extraordinary new ways of doing that. And there's also growing evidence that in that process, we come to respect and value people who we previously thought were different from ourselves. I hope that we'll dig deep into what human flourishing is all about. Why are we here? What are humans for? How do our answers to those questions build on our choices about truth and purpose and meaning? And as we sharpen our ideas of what human flourishing is all about, I hope that we'll ethically and caringly and generously and energetically promote human flourishing through good citizenship for a networked age. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for your very clear explanation of your core idea of this report. And I really agree with you. My favorite, and thank you for your 7 recommendations. My favorite recommendation is also number 6. You know, I'm a lawyer, so it's very natural for me to emphasize the value of privacy, especially in the so-called networked age. It's very, very important for the development of personality, independent personality. So I totally agree with you, and also have the same number of recommendation, favorite number. So we do have lots of ideas. I think the development of information technology, including machine learning, is really a well-known word, the double-edged sword. And it benefits the society and bring also new challenge to our future. So digital networking and algorithm do transform the way that we make decision and interaction with each other. It affects our society in a lot of aspects. So now I would like to invite Professor Xuelan to give some comments to your report. Before Professor Xue's commentary, I would like to introduce a little bit about Professor Xue to all of you and include our audience. Professor Xuelan is a Chi Kung Chair Distinguished Professor and Dean of Schwarzman College at Tsinghua University. Professor Xue used to be the Dean of the School of Public Policy and Management for over 10 years, since 2008 to 2018. He is a very well-known professor in public policy and also science, technology, innovation policy, and crisis management and global governance. And I also participate in his research project, include also the ethics principles for artificial intelligence development. He had published lots of very influential articles and books in this about areas. And this topic, I think he will be interested. So now let's welcome Professor Xue to give some comments to Professor Briggers' report. Thank you, Professor Xue.
Okay, thank you, Professor Shen, and thanks very much to Professor Briggers for your really nice introduction. And the report, of course, I now have a copy, and it's just fascinating. I'm still in the process of reading it, so I'm fortunate that I didn't have enough time to really go over to finish the whole report. But again, I think that I've already sort of learned a great deal. I think it seems to me that the significance of the report is that it really raises a very critical point that has not been at the center of our current discussion about AI governance. That is that our current focus has been very much on the the relationship between corporations and consumers, and to see how actually our governance structure can can protect consumers' privacy and so on. But I think that this report, you raised a very critical point that the regulation will need to be based on the relationship between democratic institutions and citizenship, which I think that is really very critical. I think particularly in today's what you call the internet age. People might say that, okay, this might be only be important for Western democracy and so on, but I would argue that this is as critically as important in the Chinese context as well. I think there are all kinds of public policy decisions that would have to be made, and that would have to get the involvement of the individuals, citizens, and social groups. And I think that increasingly now, I think that's being challenged. And I think that, your report, I think certainly, what I see, really brings out, the significance of the issue. And also you made so many wonderful recommendations about how actually, the tools that can be used to, the new technology and AI tools can be used to actually to help, the engagement. I like your recommendation on cultivating the complementary skills of humans and machines for collective decision making. I think that's really, it's really, in essence, what I interpret this as saying that this is AI and other internet tools. It's just like other kind of innovation in our human history. They are tools for human beings. So we should never be in a way be dominated by the technology, but rather we should really be the user of the technology. I think that many of these recommendations are wonderful, but there are a few I think that I may also have a bit sort of different ideas. For example, teach listening as a civic virtue. I fully agree that that's in general that might be the case, but I would say that in Asian culture that might be a problem. I think that Tsinghua has a so-called virtue of saying that action speaks louder, than voice. The problem is that in many cases, when you want to have policy engagement, you actually want people to speak out. You don't want them to listen always. Of course, particularly as the professors, you want your students to engage in discussion. But in Asian culture, in Asian classes, often that people are probably more interested in the virtue is listening more rather than speaking out. So I would argue that there might be some cultural slant that you may want to bring that into the issue. I think that what I think that in a way, as a whole, I think all of these recommendations are extremely useful in terms really how to think about how to, sort of really to, as what you said, what I see, to regulate the relationship between democratic institutions and citizenship. But at the same time, I feel somehow these recommendations are not enough. So what I see that they are in a way pieces here and there, but as a whole, how do we actually integrate them as a some more coherent set of actions to really to bring to improve the current situation. I think your points are actually so wonderful given what we've already seen in different countries and so on. So what I would argue that maybe in a way first of all, of course, I need to do some further reading myself. I haven't really had the chance to fully digest the report, so I would need to read more. But at the same time, I feel somehow that we are really expecting to see more, to see what kind of a more systematic sort of kind of a sort of actions that needs to be taken. I also wanted to take this opportunity just to mention something we are currently doing as a as what Professor Shen has mentioned, that China established an AI governance committee last year. And I was appointed as the chair, and so we've been working on AI governance issues. And the first set of the AI governance principles was published last June. I mean, actually, it's in June of 2019. And basically, I think that at the time when we were, debating about those principles, were indeed more concerned, as I mentioned, concerned about the corporations and consumers, also more in general, in terms of how actually we ensure that the AI is used to advance, in your words, to really to make human beings to flourish, rather than being threatened, or rather than being someday being dominated by the AI machines, and that's sort of the underlying concerns we have. But I think that your report, I think, brings some excellent point for our committee's next stage of our work, that indeed how we can promote to have the the AI and other tools to better to improve our public policy process. So I think let me thank you again for such a wonderful report, and we look forward to further discussion and engagement. Let me stop here.
Okay, thank you, Professor Xue. So just like so from your wonderful speech, I have learned perhaps your favorite recommendation will be number 2. So just like Professor Xue mentioned, he had led the guiding principle of the development of artificial intelligence. The first principle is the harmonization between human and machine. So I don't know, Professor Briggers, in the future, you would like to write not only a book of flourishment of human, also the flourishment of the machine. We should treat the machine friendly. And in law academic year, there is also the topic to discuss the personality. The personality of a machine is still as like the legal person, so it's the same question. But some is too early to discuss such kind of question. But we should do something in advance. So thank you. And I don't know, Professor, how long you will stay here. If you like, you can. I know you will leave in 1 hour. So I would like to give 5 minutes to Professor Briggers to give a short response to Professor Xue's comments. Do you have any idea to talk with Professor Xue as additional additional request to you.
Oh, well, I very much like this relationship between listening and speaking. And with the listening as a civic, of course, it may be a bit different in different cultures. Sometimes here in the West, we feel too many people are doing too much speaking and not enough listening.
Thank you.
But we're also very conscious that this listening is a dynamic thing. It's an interactive thing. So in Oxford, the traditional way of teaching, particularly in the humanities, was that each week a student has to write an essay, and now he would give the essay to his professor in advance, but in former times he would read the essay in a one-to-one meeting with the professor, and the professor would then press him very hard on the arguments that he'd made in the essay and expose where the arguments were weak and inadequate and did not draw on the evidence. And the students would do this every week of term for 3 years of study. And one professor said at the end of this, unless you go into academia or teaching or maybe one of the professions like law or medicine, for most other careers that you go into, nothing that you learn in Oxford will be of any use to you in your career, except for one thing, that if you work very hard and very diligently, then after 3 years, then for the rest of your life, you'll know when someone is speaking nonsense. And it's one of the reasons why I think a pillar of human flourishing, these 3 pillars that I gave were truth and purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
And this pillar of meaning is a very dynamic pillar. It's a very dynamic interaction. So if you look at a painting or you look at a poem, so this is extending it to the transcendent dimension, and you say, what is the meaning of that picture? What is the meaning of that poem? You cannot separate the meaning from the response of the individual. So that this sense of meaning is a very interactive one. It's a dynamic one. And that's all part of what we mean by cultivating the ability to listen well.
Okay.
By the way, let me just also add that I also very much liked your idea of maintaining distance between thought and speech. I think that's so important in today's world. And I think that, I think that, I think there's so much, I think, not only just practical purpose, but also I think in terms of really, in terms of, moral development, I think it's also so important to think hard and to really reflect and before you speak. But of course, I think I also like to comment that Professor Shen and Professor Briggers like the value of privacy for personal moral development.
Yeah.
I would argue that that alone would not be enough. So I would say that privacy and interaction are probably complementary and are both critically important for moral development. So let me stop here.
Well, of course, I agree with that. Of course, that's right. I think, and actually, the privacy can also be the privacy of a small group of trusted friends with whom we refine these ideas and develop them. But I think what we wanted to emphasize is that if you're only on the network, and particularly if you're only networking with people you already agree with, and what is sometimes called the echo chamber.
Echo chamber, yeah.
So you don't have the process which we're doing today,
yeah,
of also talking with people who will challenge your values,
yeah,
and challenge your moral development. Then you're unlikely to develop in a rich way. So we need that personal reflection. We need good friends who will challenge us, who not always agree with us, as well as the wider connectivity. If we only have the wider connectivity, I think it's unlikely that we'll develop morally.
Thank you. Thank you for so dynamic discussion. So Professor Xue has mentioned another very important value. So I totally agree. So, you know, sometimes we should, we cannot confine the meaning in advance. For instance, like the meaning of this conference or the meeting. At first, we have a specific meaning, but with development and with the discussion between you two, and perhaps change the meaning, and we improve the meaning. So it's really, we need not only privacy, but also interaction between us, among us. So thank you very much. So due to the time limit, I would like to invite another very honorable speakers. It's them, Professor Wendy Hall. So I don't know, Wendy, which is your favorite recommendation among the 7 recommendations? And before your recommendations number, I would like to introduce a little bit about Wendy Hall, Professor Wendy Hall. Dame Wendy Hall is a Regius professor.
Regis.
So
Of the king.
Okay, it's a chair professor of computer science. She is also the associate vice president of the University of Southampton, and she is also an executive director of the Web Science Institute. You have also used the name in Zoom, Web Science Institute.
Oh, have I? Okay, sorry.
And Wendy Hall, Professor Wendy Hall is a fellow of Royal Society and a Dame Commander of the British Empire of United Kingdom. Dame Wendy Hall was co-chair of United Kingdom government's Artificial Intelligence Review. She is the UK government's first skill champion for artificial intelligence, and is a member of the newly formed Artificial Intelligence Council. In this year, in May 2020, she just was appointed chair of Ada Lovelace Institute. Hopefully I have pronounced it rightly.
Yes, that's hard, isn't it, for Chinese speakers?
And Professor Wendy Hall is old friend of Tsinghua University.
Absolutely.
She has a lot of collaboration with one of my best friends, Professor Mao Sun, and also Andrew Qi Zhiyao. So now I would like to invite then Professor Wendy Hall to give your comments to Professor Briggers' report. Please.
Thank you very much for that amazing introduction. We haven't that long, so I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, and I'm really delighted to have been invited to join you, even though it's so early in the Sunday morning here. I blame Andrew Briggs for that, and he takes the blame well. And he owes me a dinner. When we
I do in Oxford,
COVID,
when it's possible again.
I'm coming to Oxford for the best dinner you can give me. So
we're looking forward to it.
So I'm a computer scientist, so I think about building these systems, and that's why I enjoy this report, because it's actually giving us a moral compass for how to build these systems. And my favorite recommendation is actually number 1, followed swiftly by number 2. I think they go so well together. As you said, I co-authored the government's UK government's AI review in 2017, which was a broad look at AI and how AI can help society, how it can help economy, and how it can help grow jobs, right? As rather than talking about automation replacing jobs. And we always talked about keeping the human in the loop, how important it was with AI systems that we didn't just hand control to the machines. And so we've all benefited from AI and social media during this awful pandemic that hopefully by this time next year I'll be in China rather than having to talk to you on Zoom. And I'm doing a lot of work. I've written a book on the geopolitical pressures on the internet, and we talk about 4 internets now. But I want to remind us that the first internet, the open and free internet with its open standards, is what enables us to use this today across continents. Whatever our values, whatever our government laws and regulations, those standards have held. And without that, we would not have been able to use the internet as we have in the pandemic age. And hopefully going into the future when we're pandemic free, but we want to work globally on things that will benefit humankind. And we've all benefited from using the social media platforms. I can't imagine not having had access to Twitter. And I assume in China, WeChat is red hot. When people are locked down, they survive using WeChat. When I'm in China, I use WeChat. President Trump's just banned it as an example of things breaking down a bit. We've benefited from these companies using AI, but we really don't know what they do. We know they use our data, and effectively they're recommending us things, right? That's what the companies are using, but they have an awful lot of our data, and we don't really know what they do with it and what they might do with it in the future. But we've benefited for work, for play, and for shopping, right? Food in the crisis, but also any sort of shopping. It's such a different experience to what it was when we had to walk around the shops. So it's mainly recommendations, but the problems come even more when the machines are doing the decision making. And Andrew spoke about that. I don't have to repeat all the things he said, and the report says about how careful we have to be when the machines are intelligent enough to make decisions, and how important it is to keep the human in the loop. We recently had a very difficult thing to deal with in the countries, as you have had. Our schools have been locked down, the children were not getting educated, and they didn't take their exams last summer, their final exams in the schools. And so their grades, on which their entrance to university was based, were actually decided by an algorithm. Now, it wasn't a machine learning on lots of data. It was quite a straightforward algorithm, but it gave us the wrong results. Some children were very, very badly served by that algorithm and were given grades that were way below what they were going to get if they, as the teachers predicted, if they did the exams. And it was because the algorithm design was flawed and the data on which they tested it was flawed, and they didn't test it in a way that meant that they were flushing out all the problems. Now, that was on a very simple algorithm. It wasn't machine learning, it wasn't a neural network. It's much worse, 100 times worse, if we're dealing with AI, deep learning, which is impossible to explain. The system can't explain how it's making a decision. And, often human beings can't explain how they make a decision. And increasingly, we're trying to train our machines to think like humans do. And we can't explain. The doctors often can't explain why they've made a decision. The lawyers can't explain, or the judge can't explain, or why the decision's been made. And you have to have inquiries to understand where things went wrong if they go wrong. You've talked about that. And it's so important that we develop what we computer scientists call explainable AI. So we can, if you like, reverse engineer what the neural networks are doing so that we can work out the decision making. But my worry about that is that this will be a race between the people who are developing smarter and smarter deep learning and neural networks, and the people who, scientists, are trying to develop algorithms to explain what the neural networks have done. It may be that we'll never win that race. And so I think we have to develop much more process-driven ways of understanding how AI works, maybe learning from the financial sector of undertaking and setting up a system of auditing AI systems and the data that they're based on, so that companies have to, on a regular basis, every year or maybe, or like we do with financial information, they have to regularly report on what data they use, how they use it, and how their algorithms work, and demonstrate that the algorithms do what they say they're doing, and show test results, a bit like the car companies have to about emissions, show test results to show the decisions that are being made, were they right or wrong in particular circumstances. I also include diversity in that in a big way. We cannot have all these systems run by the people who understand how to write machine learning code, right? We have to have very diverse, diversity of analysis, and that's not just about gender. It's about age and ethnicity and values and cultures and of disabilities, and making sure that the whole of society is represented in the way that we analyze ethics and AI. And this is about ethics and AI. That's what I'm talking about here. How do we decide whether AI is doing good or not? How do we test whether AI is for good? We have an awful lot of centers and companies talking about ethics AI, talking about the ethics of AI. I've got in front of me the Beijing AI principles, which were developed, and our Mao Song-Sung was part of the group that developed them. We have in the UK and in the US and in Europe various different frameworks for ethics for AI, and companies do, and they almost all start with AI should be used for good. But how do we know? How do we know that what we're doing, what the AI is doing, will turn out to be for good? And these we have to develop, I think, as global standards. And this is why I talk about the 4 internets, because we've got the internet that we're using to run this Zoom call. In the US, everything's very market-led with the companies. In Europe, it's very data protection and government-led. And in China, it's a mix of market and government-led. And we have all sorts of geopolitical pressures on the internet that I worry about. The AI regulation regimes will continue to fracture the internet, and that's my concern. I'm just going to finish by one thing to add to that, which is that when I'm talking about recommendation 1, human morals and values, I think when we consider ethics and AI, we have to remember that morals and ethics are not exactly the same thing. I don't know how it works in the Chinese language, but in English, ethics and morals, the words are often used interchangeably, whereas an ethics really is about the rules that's provided by society. They could be in religious principles, codes of conducts of professions like lawyers or computer scientists, engineers, or regulation and law provided by government. But morals is really our individual ethical code, right? I don't know if you have that distinction in Chinese. And I think that means we really, really, really have to think about education from the tiniest children about how to work with machines, how to live with machines, what to expect and what to worry about. My friend Tabitha Goldstub, who is the chair of the AI Council, has just written a wonderful book targeted at young children called How to Talk to Robots. And I hope one day you'll have that translated into Chinese, because it is a fabulous book. And I think that's one of the key things that we as a society need to do, is get that education piece right. Thank you very much for inviting me this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Hall. Thank you for your wonderful speech. And just now you mentioned about the difference between ethics and morals. In Chinese, we have also 2 different terms. The meaning is same as you have talked.
Okay.
So, yeah, the moral is only for individual restrictions. So it's different from the ethics. Ethics is the guiding principle. So for
and I think that with the social, if you forgive me, I'm really pleased to hear that because it helps me understand. But I think it's very, when we're talking about social media platforms and we look to the government to regulate them, but actually, you know, we have a moral imperative to behave well on them. Right? We wouldn't be horrible. We're not generally horrible to people in real life. Why should we be horrible to them on social media? You know, why should we feel that we have it's okay to behave badly on social media when we wouldn't do in real life? And I think it's really important that we educate people, educate youngsters for that. Because, I mean, I assume it's the same in China. The problems of with young people of bullying and sharing videos that are not appropriate, and you know, these things that they feel they can do because technology allows them to do it, but it's morally wrong to do that. Whether you make it a law or not, it's morally wrong to do that.
It's a very, very critical foundation of the development of the information technology. So thank you very much. Yes, and thank you for your contribution to today's conference. So
my pleasure.
We have invited three experts, three Chinese experts from different fields. Like Professor Xue is from the field of public policy, and we have also invited one of scientists, a young and very brilliant and promising young scientist is Professor Yu Yang. And Professor Yu is an assistant professor in the Institute for Interdisciplinary Information Science at Tsinghua University. He has obtained his PhD degree in Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Stanford University. So his academic fields include algorithm economics and quantitative economics, as well as computational energy economics. And Professor Yu is also very dynamic researchers in the field of science and technology, interaction between technology and the law. So, and thank you very much to take time to join our discussion. So now I will give floor to Professor Yu.
Okay.
Welcome.
Many thanks for Professor Shen to include me in these very valuable and inspiring discussions. And I have read the report, the wonderful report, which is really inspiring and insightful. And the most thing the most points the report attract me is that actually this report has addressed the interdisciplinary the necessary of interdisciplinary research when we're talking about the AI governance or computational laws. For example, for the topic 2, the nurture the complementary skill of human and machine for collective decision making. This is a very important topic for interdisciplinary research, because if we want to answer that kind of questions, if we want to explore what's the meaning of nurture the complementary skills, we must combine multidiscipline knowledges and theories together. For example, if we want to answer a question, whether data is necessary and valuable, especially the privacy data is valuable and necessary for public good, public service. That not just involve the research in computer science, in data scientists, but also involve the theory about the boundary of government and the limit of liberty, which has been mathematically discussed since 1916, started from Professor James Buchanan, who is a Nobel economist. Okay, so that means when AI penetrated into the society, we involve this kind of new topics about the limit of liberty, the boundary of individual and the boundary of public society, and the boundary of government. Okay, However, if we only rely on the traditional, like the game theory or the mechanism design in the collective decision analysis on those kind of issues, we cannot touch the key points of the artificial intelligence governance in nowadays. For example, in very recent of my research, which is try to use reinforcement learning to control the pandemic in a city spread. So that involves several questions. For example, whether the privacy data is really necessary if we want to flatten the curve and also protect the economy. The answer is no, because if we know the computer science and operation research theory, we can model this kind of pandemic control problem as a mobility control problem, which restrict the mobility between the origin and destination without knowing exactly every individual person's private information. However, if we do not know this computer science background, we cannot answer that question whether private data is necessary or not. Okay, so this is why for social scientists or law students in School of Law, they must have some understanding about the technology, the algorithm, the operation research, the computer science. Okay, but on the other side, the research results show that this kind of policy, the policy generated by algorithm, yes, they can protect the economy, they can protect the people from the virus spread, but it's also protect the privacy. But the problem is the policy is so sophisticated, it cannot be implemented by the current government. And this kind of topic come into the public policy area and even economic area. What types of or like the government administration area? That means what type of government, what type of governance structures we should have if we really want to have a governance which can protect the privacy, also protect the economy, also protect the people from the virus. So the current government structure is insufficient to support such AI governance. That comes back to the second topic: what's the meaning of the skills of human and the skills, the skills of complementary skills of human and the machine for collective decision making. So the skills including two things. One is tool. If we want to develop the tool, like as I mentioned, if we want to develop the tool to discuss whether the private data is necessary for the public management, for the public health, then we really rely on the interdisciplinary topics from computer science and economics and operation research. On the other side, if we want to discuss the skills, it's not just including the tools, but also including the institution. We should have some new institution innovation in our government, in our Congress, in our court, to reorganize those kind of institutions so that our institution is smart and capable enough to support a governance during AI era. Okay, I think this kind of interdisciplinary research idea are also addressed by other topics like keep distance between speech and thinking. Also, we should keep distance from speech and thinking. It's not just education problem. It's also a technical problem. It's a governance problem. Like in internet, we can not guarantee every people can be well educated. Okay, especially in current welfare distribution system in the United States, there's no way that every people can be educated equally. So also this kind of keep distance of speech and thinking is a kind of governance. Also, we should keep distance. We should separate speech and action on the network, on the internet. For example, in internet, it's really easy to motivate a boycott movement. This is not just a speech. This is a movement which can really intervene market, which can really distort the price signal. These kind of things is not speech, they are action. So if we want to clearly separate the difference between speech, think, and action, we should the interdisciplinary research from between the research, the scholars in law research, in computer scientist in computer science research, and then we can understand the theory how to separate the speech and action, and how can we develop tools to assist people keep distance between keep the distance between speech and the thinking. So to conclude all my point. So nowadays, if we really want to, so I really recommend this book, this report, and also I hope when people read this book, I hope people realize this report include a very strong signal to the society that in the future, when we're talking about the governance and the legislation issues in the AI era, that's interdisciplinary talk. That's interdisciplinary topics which must involve students, scholars from different areas. Also, we need to educate a group of interdisciplinary scholars who understand computer science, who understand the economics, who understand public policy and the public governance, so that when they discuss these kind of issues, they can address the correct point and adopt correct research tools. Okay, to conclude by another point in this report, wonderful point, that is understand the democracy, re-evaluate the democracy as approach to improve the value, the people's trust and unity. Okay, when I joined this IIRS, I just realized computer science model the democracy system and the market system as a distribution computing system. They have a completely different way to observe the institution from our economists and political scientists. And these kind of new perspectives are super valuable. It involves the computational complexity theory into the economic and political science research, which are will be super valuable for the future discussion in this area. Thank you very much, and for including me in this kind of area. And I learned a lot from previous discussion, and hope I will learn more by Professor Liu's address. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Yu. So it's so inspiring speech. And in one word, to summary your wonderful speech, I think you have brought us a lot of terms, so such as speaking, listening, thinking, and action. How to handle such kind of relationship among so different terms, how to keep a distance between the listening and the speaking, keep a distance listening and thinking, and also the listening to action is very, very automated questions we need to think about in such kind of networked age. So it's very inspiring speech. And I also want to have a response to your question about the, I don't know if your favorite recommendation number 2, so it's kind of collective decision making between a human and a machine. So currently, we all regard artificial intelligence or machine learning or machine as a tool or instrument But in future, with development of the level of intelligence, I don't think so. They have their own idea. It's already cannot be controlled by the computer science scientist as a designer. So it's really an ultimate question about, we call the legal personality of machine learning. I don't know in the future if there is three kinds of person. If one is the so-called natural, very natural person like us with blood and body. So another one will be the artificial intelligent person. The third one will be copied by a person. So in the same class and the same conference room, we don't know who is the natural person. So it's really a good question. Thank you very much. So, and the last speaker is from our law school, Professor Liu Han. Professor Liu is graduate, also get the SJD degree from the Yale Law School, and he is currently associate professor and also assistant dean of Tsinghua Law School. Unfortunately, it's my fault. Today is a very special day for Tsinghua. It is a graduate student's interview. So Professor Liu is currently participating the graduate students' interview. So he cannot attend a conference online, but he has a record his speech in the video. So now I would like to invite you to watch the video from Professor Liu, and then we can have a discussion and also questions from all of the audience. So please.
Hello, everybody. This is Han at Tsinghua Law School.
Hello.
It is a great honor to join this panel. My research fields are public law and cyber law. I also do research on much broader topics in political philosophy and legal theory. So this report appeals to me greatly. Putting together multiple perspectives from natural sciences, social sciences, political philosophy, and law, this path-breaking book reflects upon the networked society governed by algorithms and big data. It points out the direction for social development in the networked age. For experts working in different fields, this report shows us a big picture, driving us to think big. There is much to be commended here. Let me just say a few words on what I learned from this important report as a legal scholar. That is, the networked platform has transformed a user into what I call the estranged self. That is, users are excluded from the decision-making process and disconnected from each other with different beliefs or in different platforms. The task before us is how to remedy such a situation. Let me specify. First, as the report shows, we must bring back the idea of citizenship in the networked information society, which tend to be more and more aristocratic and hierarchical. The internet used to be a liberating force, a force that makes the world flat and decentralized. But increasingly, it turns out it makes new forms of hierarchy and domination, especially in the age of big data, AI, and platforms. We're increasingly becoming subjects in the information empire, rather than citizens in the networked republic. This report reminds of us that the old Roman law distinction between citizen and slave is taking new forms now. That is quite illuminating. For example, from the perspective of citizenship, we can perceive the deeper structure of discrimination based upon algorithms. It is not just violating the rights of a consumer. More than that, it is about whether the users are allowed to have a say in the decision-making process. Without the right to participate, The users are merely subjects who has no say in how she or he is treated and does what he or she is told to do. We don't want to be put into a contemporary version of Foucauldian panopticon reinforced by machine learning and algorithms. Technology should not estrange us from one another. It needs to bring us together in a more convenient and efficient way. This is my first point. My second point is thinking about the relationship between users and the platform. We must move from the idea of contract to that of social contract. Conventional thinking tends to understand that relationship in terms of a legal contract. But we must remember users often sign the contract written by the platform without the process of negotiation. The user agreement is mostly a boilerplate. Behind that, inequality and domination exist. The platform is not only an intermediary. The relationship between platform and users is not simply a contractual relationship, but rather a social-political one. To remedy that, the crucial point is not the idea of a civil contract, but that of a social contract. Rousseau laid down the basis of modern society with the idea of social contract when individuals join the society by signing that contract to ensure equal participation in the public life, especially the equal representation in the process of lawmaking. Following Rousseau, Kant said humans are characterized by the capacity to self-legislate. The basis of human freedom is to free from laws made by other forces. We cannot just make laws according to mathematical rules. Free will must work. We don't want to walk into what Max Weber called the iron cage, made by a technocrat. For moral reasoning and public policy making, the proper role of technology is to help humans rather than replace them. This is my second point. My third point concerns the distinction between public and private, which the report spends a chapter on. I totally agree with the argument that we have to protect the private sphere, not just for the sake of privacy itself. Rather, it is supposed to let netizens have uninterrupted space to think and reflect so that they can make choices thoughtfully and independently. I want to add that the public-private distinction can also aid us to think about another important question. That is the nature of platform. Is the platform a public entity or private company? Of course, from a purely legalistic point of view, most platforms, whether in China or in the United States, are private-owned enterprises. They're not state-owned. But we can feel the tremendous power of platforms in our daily lives. Platforms not only influence the commodity prices, but also determine people's behavior patterns and even shape their values. Sometimes they are more powerful than traditional governments. For example, the platform can regulate speech. It can resolve disputes. It even tries to issue currency. The various kinds of state power around the currency, whether legislative power, such as making transaction rules, executive power, such as enforcing those rules, or judicial power, such as dispute resolution. All this power will emerge along with the large-scale use of digital currency. The platform looks like a state. Then what is to be done about the de facto public power enjoyed by the platforms? The modern legal system has come up with a set of principles and rules to regulate public power. But what about the private power? Can we apply the principles of limited government, due process, and proportionality to platforms that make public decisions? How should we make private governance fair and just? These are the questions we must grapple with. All in all, we have to bring the estranged self in the network age back into a community of the users, by the users, and for the users. We have to revive the civic ideals of netizenship. Technology, business, and the law all have to respect both the negative liberty and the positive liberty of netizens. Put another way, we have to protect both privacy and publicity. Lawyers must try to flesh out all these ideals in concrete rules and their implementation. There is a lot of work to be done here. Let's try. This is all what I want to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Okay, so Professor Liu has delivered 3 points. And he mentioned about from citizen to the subject, and from contract to social contract, and the relationship between private sector and the public power is really a very crucial terminology in the computational law we should research. So just like Professor Briggers had mentioned, the citizen came from the word city. So it includes individual independence and also the community. So how the community, the future community, we cannot imagine. And we're looking forward also to Professor Briggers' new book, Human Flourishing in the Future. So now I would like to open floor to the audience. If you have any questions to Professor Briggers or Professor Hall, please raise your hand online. Is there any questions from somebody?
So
yeah,
maybe I can ask a question
yes.
to Professor Briggers and Professor Hall.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, like in 20 years ago, in late 1990s and early 2000, the development of internet also brought a very significant challenge to the governance, especially the international governance and the relations at that time. And in order to deal with those kind of debates, whether we should have a free internet, open internet globally, how to deal with the sovereign of a nation and the open internet principles, how to deal with this kind of two concepts. There's a lot of debates on that, which also involve a lot of researchers in computer science, political science, in law area. So what's you know, I think maybe I know both of you has involved in those kind of controversies at that time, and also that kind of debates, not just a debate, it involved this, it generate a lot of political change in globally, like the spring of Arabian world. So let's recall, let's compare the internet governance and the AI governance together. What's the difference? What's the common point and the difference? Do you think what's the common point? Do you think they share? And so what's the difference if they think you think these two topics are, and what can we learn what types of lessons can we learn from the internet international governance, that can benefit the AI governance discussions in the next 20 years? Thank you.
Well, this is absolutely Dame Wendy's expertise. So, Wendy, please, over to you.
Thank you for the question. I think the most important thing is that the open and free internet was based on open standards and open protocols at the technical level. They are holding, right? That's how we're able to do this conference call. The technology standards are holding. If they break, if governments decide they want alternative internet architectures that do not have common global standards, then that's the end of the internet as we know it. And it will be a completely different world where we would have to negotiate, possibly pay, have trade laws about how we run the internet. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but now, and I think we've had 30 years to learn there are flaws to the way it operates at the moment technically, but I would like that to be worked out at a global level. If it's not, then, and I know there are people like the Telecoms Union and others who are looking at how we might improve things, but we have to have global agreement, or it's the end of this global ability to exchange information globally. Now, on top of that, you've got the way different governments are regulating data. And so the AI piece is the data is the bit in the middle, right? And of course it involves telecoms companies and also the people that help us move the data around. But basically, the governance of data is controlled by the governments, and there are different cultural values around that. As I think I alluded to, I sort of think of the US as very market-led, Europe is very data protection and citizen-led, government citizen-led, and China's very a mix of government and market-led, and but they can coexist. I think they can coexist if there's an understanding of the cultural values in the different areas. I believe we can. I mean, President Trump is causing ripples at the moment, and American companies cannot operate. Google and Facebook cannot operate in China, but we can live and work around that. Okay, and then you ask about AI. Now, AI, of course, is at the moment is all about learning from data, and so anything we do with AI is influenced by the way that the governments control the access to data. So AI is hugely dependent on government regulation at the moment. And again, I think we can live with that, because I think, and this is why I like this report, is that what this report talks about is things that we have in common, things that we share, right? Even though we have deeply different ways in which our countries are governed, we can share these sort of human principles. And that's where I think you then get to the point where you can have agreement at that human principle level. And so I like to make sure that we keep, this is why this is so important, this type of workshop, we really keep, the issues around making sure AI is good for the world as a common issue, and the technical standards as a common issue. And where we differ, we can agree to differ in the middle. Does that make any sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything, Andrew?
I love what you said, and you're able to say it with great authority because of the ways that you've worked in this yourself. So I love that. I think that when you talk about what we share, this is a very dynamic area. It relates to what we were talking about earlier about being morally load-bearing, and people sometimes talk, you see this written in books, that we must teach the machines human values, as if there was one thing called human values. And human values is something we need to work at, we need to develop. I think it is a very exciting and dynamic discussion internationally at the moment. I mean, just for example, in the field of economics, that whereas in the past, a lot of economics was dominated by a concept called Homo economicus, which assumed that humans act rationally, greedily, selfishly, and lazily, and that could enable you to do your economic modeling. I think we're now getting a much richer conception of what it is that motivates humans. And they can be ethical and moral and generous and cooperative and energetic. And I think that as we discuss this together, and let's use the tools of the networked age to discuss it, like we're doing today, in ways that would have been more difficult without the network. So we can explore these values together. We can see what we can share. We can see where we differ. Where we differ, we can challenge each other and say, well, let's try and improve our standards. Let's learn from each other and from our different cultures.
And I just want to say one thing. I'm Professor Yang Yu. I love you have set up an interdisciplinary institute. The Web Science Institute is very interdisciplinary, and I talk to the people in computer science about this, sort of interdisciplinary work. I work with our legal department, our law department in Southampton. So important, and the politics department, the economics department. It's so important that we cross disciplinary boundaries, like just as you're doing.
Yeah. Maybe we can keep in touch and to discuss more about that, because now in Tsinghua we have a lot of this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration, not just the research but also education too, and also we try to figure out a way to build up a community, interdisciplinary community, not just a platform, like traditional platform, but a community. Really, people can understand each other, and we can educate a bunch of people who are not just a translator between communication between disciplines, but they really understand the two things, so they can combine together. So maybe we can discuss more about how to educate a bunch of these kind of students or scholars in the future. Yeah, I think
I'd love to. Let's take that offline.
And I think there's great scope here in Oxford. We're just starting up at the Blavatnik School of Government an activity called the Foundation of Value and Values. And we have in it economists, business studies, political science, genetics, it's important, neuroscience, and me as a materials scientist, and other disciplines too. We've got to do it.
Today's conference is really an interdisciplinary discussion. I really enjoyed that. So I'm looking forward to Wendy Hall's next visit to Tsinghua.
Oh, so am I.
And new friends after the
next
pandemic.
Year, I hope. Next year.
And actually, we have planned Professor Briggers to visit to Tsinghua in September. Have not online report, but also so due to the pandemic, we cannot. So, is any other questions?
Professor, I have one question.
Okay, please.
Thank you. I'm a law school student, and I really like the second recommendation in this report. It's about the collective decision making. But I have one question: is that I have found that all of us have realized the challenges caused by algorithm or automated decision making. But it seems like we still do not have a concrete law or concrete algorithm act to resolve these challenges. So my question is, why after so many principles have been raised by different countries, such as, trustworthy principles, responsibility principles, and explainability principles, but we still do not have concrete legislation? What have prevented us from making such a progress, and what should we do in the near future to, make a concrete legislation about algorithm regulation? Thank you.
Okay.
I think it's too early.
How about the response from Andrew?
Well, actually, Dean Chen, I think you should respond. I think this is your expertise.
No,
I'd love to hear your answer.
To you.
Please, can you answer this question?
So now, so even in China, we have discussed this question for many times, but perhaps some scholars think, like Wendy has mentioned, it's too early. How do you think?
Andrew, do you agree it's too early? I
Yeah,
think it's too early. I think we don't know enough about how we should regulate this, and we could make a lot of mistakes.
I'm sure.
The European Union are going to bring in regulation for AI next year.
Yeah, I think, yes. So we do have so many discussions. Most of the persons from the information industry, they hope we couldn't make a legislation too early to constrain the development of artificial intelligence. So in Chinese policy, there is also such kind of idea we should encourage development of the information industry. But on the other hand, there is also very, very, very crucial issues is about the protection of personal information and the privacy. Yeah. So how to balance the two kind of values? Really, in such kind of situation is in the dilemma. So
I think you've really hit the nail on the head, as we say. I think that's because there are certain things that are happening. I worry about deep fakes where people are using videos of faces and putting them into other videos without that person's permission. That should be immediately made illegal. And but you have to get this balance right between not over-regulating, but making sure that you stop really, really bad things happening when your individual privacy is compromised.
Yeah, even there are so many different ideas, but one idea is clear. We cannot stop from the development of technology, including artificial intelligence. So we couldn't change, we couldn't transform the technology. We can only be apt to the development of technology and coexist between the human and the machine. So,
but this is where the interdisciplinary institutes are really important.
Okay.
We can raise the flags. We can raise the flags.
Okay.
It's also where the strategic thinking is really important. So, there's a military expression in English, time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. And so, time spent thinking, what are you really trying to do is seldom wasted. And what are you really trying to do is inseparable from what does it really mean for humans to flourish. And so as one really thinks that through, so one will be well placed to address what admittedly are very, very hard questions about these competing desirable capabilities.
Yeah. So thank you again for your question. The last question, please.
Okay, professors.
You. Which one?
I'm Yuying.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for your sharing about not only about the reports, but also about some thinking and learning methods. And I have a question that we all know that Tsinghua Law School began the subject of computational law in order to respond to the challenges and opportunities brought by the information technology. And so with great honor to be a student of computational law, and I would like to ask your professor's understanding and opinion about this subject, and what about your expectation of this specific deep integration? Thank you.
Yeah, it's also related to interdisciplinary research. So from the brilliant, you look so Ying, you look like against the light, so it's brilliant. So please give some comments to the computational law and your expectation for the development of computational law. First from Wendy.
I'm not gonna give a long answer because it's nearly time for breakfast here. I want to go soon, but the I think that the computational lawyers will be the highest paid lawyers in the future.
Okay.
And I think it's a very exciting thing for young people to be part of.
Okay.
I think people who can understand both the law and computational science will be very highly prized in the future.
Yeah, we have enrolled students who have very strong background on science and technology, especially computer science and automations. So Andrew.
I love the question. I love the talent that is clearly coming along in Tsinghua University. That's fantastic. I just wanted to emphasize that we shouldn't only think about the problems. There are fabulous opportunities. And the way that I use the machine learning in my laboratory, as far as I know, has no legal complications. We've never had a legal claim from one of our quantum devices objecting to the way that we apply machine learning to it. And it's really transforming the way we can do our science research. And it's bringing huge benefits. And I think there are so many other areas, I've mentioned medicine already, but so many other areas where the machine learning is just a fabulous technology that's opening up great new possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we want to do is to create the culture that can use those for human flourishing, and the legal framework that, like the best of all legal frameworks, gives you freedom to explore and to use the benefits that this marvelous technology really can offer at its best.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Wendy and Andrew, do you still have time for the next question?
I do. Wendy's getting a bit hungry for breakfast, I think,
Well,
but
my
I've got
husband
time.
wants to go out for breakfast.
Okay, 5 minutes. So
I'm happy to stay.
Laura.
Thank you. Hi, Professor. I'm a junior student at Tsinghua Law School. So as we have noticed, platform is definitely an important element in today's network age, and it may have profound influence in the consensus building process. Therefore, my question is, what role should the internet platform play in the process of promoting the construction of civic ideas? Should the platform serve as an assistant to public governance or a spokesperson for civil rights? Thank you.
Still too windy.
To me?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a very good question. It's quite a deep one. I think that I'm going to be. I think both. I don't know. I don't know how WeChat works because I do have a WeChat account, but I can only go so far till I reach Chinese, and I don't know anything. My friends talk to me in English on WeChat, and I send them a few panda icons, which seem to be universal. But certainly on our social media platforms, they are used for both. I mean, you see some really marvelous things being sent around on the platforms, really help people. And certainly in the pandemic, I don't know what it's been like in China, but many people in my world get very depressed because they can't see their friends, they can't see their family. We're not living normal lives, and depression and unhappiness is rife. And the internet has really helped people, really helped people to get through that. But on the other hand, it is also the cause of civil unrest. People spread rumor, they spread, I mean, we have the dreadful, I don't know, you probably have it in China too, the people who are anti-vaccination, and the people who are, anti-government. It's different in our worlds, but we have, we have, okay, we can vote our government out, but there are people that want them out sooner than that, and there's an awful lot of, and this tends to build into angriness, anger. So it amplifies the social media platforms. They act as echo chambers, and they amplify. You tend to talk to the people that think like you do, so they amplify all these views. And in some ways, it does. You only see on the social media platforms what you see in society, but you see it bigger, and everything happens faster. And so once something's out there, it's very hard to bring it back. That's hard to regulate against. It's really difficult to regulate against in law. It's really difficult to say that's true and that's false. right? Who decides that, right? At some levels, who decides? You know, and there are not absolute truths and falseness, and it's really, I think, again, it comes back to the moral imperative, and it's a mix of, and we wrote about this in the Internet Governance report I was on. It's a mix of government regulation, the companies self-regulating in a way. The companies have to be responsible, and we have to be responsible too. So it's a mix of things, and it's very hard to predict how it will go, I think. But
okay.
Sorry, I should stop because it's
Still time for breakfast. So, Andrew, you can give us a conclusion.
Well, I love what you've said, Wendy, and I warm to it so much. And as always, you're able to speak with such authority and experience of these things. But just a tiny bit to add, Flora. People often make the distinction between speech content and speech action. So the speech content is, today is Sunday, that's factual information, it's content. The speech action might be, next time in Tsinghua, I want to have dinner with Dean Shen. That's a commitment from me to Dean Shen. And so it's speech action. And another useful distinction, which is a different one, is that the distinction between privacy and anonymity. And today we've talked quite a lot about the value of privacy and the importance of it, but it needs to be distinguished from anonymity. Anonymity. So again, you can have the speech content, the factual content, but almost always factual content is enriched when you know who it is that's saying it. That's why Dean Shen took so much trouble to introduce each speaker today, because who they are matters, and it gives credibility to what they say. And therefore, when we're using the networking, we're using the social media to develop values, to develop positive aspects of human flourishing. Very often anonymity is unhelpful. It sometimes makes people think they have the license to be abusive and destructive and negative. And therefore to say who we are and to think carefully what our identity is and to make it genuine and authentic and not an artificial identity, and then to be willing to make that identity part of what it is that we share in the network, it can help to make it more positive and more constructive at its best.
Very profound. That's a good note.
Okay, so we should conclude this afternoon's discussion, and we'll give time for, so enjoy your breakfast or lunch or brunch. So
on the beach, going to the beach.
Okay, I'll go to the beach, so enjoy the Sunday. Thank you very much for your great contribution to this wonderful discussion. And it's also, I would declare, it's also the close of our third International Forum on Computational Law. So it's a very, very exciting end for the third International Forums due to your great contribution to the topic about the human quality and the human flourishing movement in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for
hosting.
Thank you for hosting. Thank you for the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good to meet you all.
Brunch and the beach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Talk with you later.
We'll do that. Thank you, Weixing.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, Wendy.
Bye-bye.